trading gold with the SQ signals. The gold market is something that I have avoided for a while now. I used to be very active with it, but it just seemed to be spiky and whippy, and I just kind of got away from it. But a few weeks back, I decided to take a look at it from a little different perspective, and that was, you know, rather than trying to see it as a nice trending market, how about, you know, what would these little SQ signals do? So we're just going to take a look at this. Shouldn't take too long. One thing I say is must demand great CFs, and that's true of this SQ signal, and it's more true of that than the trending signals, because let's face it, you got the strength of the trend with the trending signals. But if you notice, Jerry does a lot of reversal type trades because he knows he's getting into some of his zones and patterns are setting up, and it's time for the market to reverse. So these are, you know, more reversal. Some of the trades are big trades, and some are very little. And of course, there are TEDs. But there are 5 things we'll look at. There's more than 5 confirming factors, but I just thought I'd focus on these 5, and that is price extremes on the 5-range chart, the 5-range exhaustion 1 signal confirmation. One of the things I look for in my trading is to get completely different things agreeing, whether it be these multiple DPTLs from completely different chart types agreeing, or an indicator that's calculated completely differently. So I do use this exhaustion 1 signal, and it is unfiltered. So yep, there's going to be all kinds of little nuisance signals, really just like the SQ signals. These are unfiltered signals. That's what this is down at the bottom. So there's a lot of signals to ignore. We're just looking at ones that we have really good confirming factors. Now, I will tell you, when I'm actually trading these, I do filter some of these SQ signals out, some of the real counter trend ones. But for this demonstration, I just wanted to show all. The number 3 item we'll look at is the DPTL multi-chart confluence zones, and number 4, just major EMAs. 5 is price at Bollinger Band on both charts. So these are 4. You can see I added a 5th one. So it just says, so these are 5 good CFs, but not all possible CFs. So let me do this, and we'll bring our chart back. I will be using the global cursor, which is a wonderful little tool and can be very annoying at times. But and I kind of had a starting point here. And the first one we come to is, and you can see it on and just follow that global cursor on both charts. You know, notice that we've got the SQ signal. We've got the shaded background, which is a requirement for the SQ signal, and it stuck its little nose outside of the Bollinger Band on that right-hand chart. But we do not have much of anything going for us on that left-hand chart. The price is not at the Bollinger Band. There's no X1 signal. So it was a small winning trade, but it didn't get confirmed. So we go on to the next one, and there's an SQ that now we can clearly see that the price is outside of the Bollinger Band. On that left-hand chart, we've got an X1 signal. Of course, we've got the SQ signal. And I want you to notice on that left-hand chart, the green line is the Bollinger Band at 2 standard deviations, but that little fine yellow line is 3 standard deviations. And usually, mathematically speaking, 3 standard deviations will control or contain the price 99% plus of the time. So when you see something get close or even a little past that 3rd standard deviation, you can be pretty well assured it's not going to stay there very long. The exception to the rule, of course, is impulsing price action, which usually just travels between the 2nd and the 3rd standard deviation. So there's the first little SQ signal that had good confirmation, and that one wouldn't work quite well. So moving along, and you notice I didn't get my ellipse on this one, but we had the X1 signal. We had the SQ signal. We look over, sure enough, Now the nice thing about this X1 signal on a 5-range chart is that it will form and complete before this reversal bar on the Renko Supreme will complete. So you'll basically, you'll see the dot, and then all of a sudden you'll be getting, warning SQ, and you go, oh, well, I've got this dot. How about that? So that is a confirm. And we just happen to have a little overhead helper here. That is the 200 moving average from a 15 range bar chart. And so that one was a pretty decent chart. And where did it go down to? It went right down to the 200 and the 600. Now, moving on. Notice this SQ signal that worked very well. We didn't get an X1 dot. It wasn't out to the Bollinger Band. It had some things going for it. It was at the 600 MA and a little minor double top. So that one's a little bit, it doesn't quite fit my plan that I'm presenting today, but it had some things going for it. So I didn't circle that one. And I'm not going to mention all of these, because a lot of these SQ signals, they just don't have much confirmation at all on the other chart. So I'm just bypassing them. So if you're wondering why I'm going past a lot of these, that's why. Again, we've got an SQ signal here. If you'll notice, we've got a 3-bar cell pattern. We had an SQ signal, and we just didn't have a signal going off on the other chart. We had one way over here. We had the X1 signal. It's way up high, but no SQ signal. So I'm looking for both. So we go on, and again, I'm bypassing a whole bunch of signals here. And the reason I'm bypassing, they just didn't have the confirmation. So there's a whole lot of signals on here, some of which would have worked really well, some would have been TEDs, but they didn't have the confirmation I was looking for. Now you see the VR signals are there, just not talking about those today. Again, we've got this SQ signal, just didn't have the confirmation I was looking for. Moving along here. Now this one says, good-looking CFs on 5-range chart. Well, but there's no X1 dot. What happened? Well, this is what I'm noticing on the 5-range chart is a pullback to the 50 EMA, and the 600 is right there, and a local DPTL is right there, all on that 5-range chart. So that looked pretty good. Up we go. Now, I'm going to slide over a little bit so you can see both of these, because I want to make a point here. This one we had a 5-range X1 dot. Notice we're relatively closer to the 200. In other words, these are reversal signals. Well, this is going to be a roadblock, and I just wanted you to see. We had these X1s on both, but notice this price is a lot farther from that 200, so I have a little more room to travel. Now that's just something to keep in mind. Where did the price end up going to? Well, it went down to the 600 EMA and the 50% internal fib, right there. And you can see on the 5-range chart, we're getting a couple of X1 dots going off. We also have the 15 range, 200 EMA showing up. It's on this chart too. You just have to. No, maybe it's not. There it is. So, but notice how differently things calculate. Moving on. Again, we had some SQ signals, but just not much help at all on that 5-range chart. See, this SQ signal is obviously at the Bollinger Band. That defines when you're going to get an SQ signal. But notice that 5-range is just out in no man's land. So just no help there. Was it a good winning trade? Yes, but it just didn't have the confirmation. Moving along, and there we've got our X1 signal. Notice we don't have an SQ, because we're just 1 bar from being in a squeeze. I just wanted to kind of point that out. Are you going to take some X1 signals that don't have SQs, I will tell you, I tend to do that. If you take a look over here, you notice that that price spiked down, and it is well past 3 standard deviations. And of course, the little X1 signals are going crazy that far out. And sure enough, price moved. So it's one of the things I look for is just, did the price spike? Okay, not trending, but did it just spike outside of that 3rd standard deviation? Those tend to work out quite well. You know, my note here, very successful SQ, but poor confirmation. Again, if you look at that 5 range chart, there's just nothing. You know, there's no help at all. So I tend to, you know, avoid that one. Nice trade. And I'm not mentioning anything about the BR signals today. We come over here, we've got a little SQ signal. Now, on this first peak right here, we had X1 signals, but they occurred kind of a little too far to the left. You know, we're not in a squeeze, nothing's happening. There's our first little peak. No squeeze, no nothing. Finally, it pulls up. We get the squeeze signal. We get another 5 range X1, and we have the benefit of a local double top. So that one comes down. Here's an example, and I've got this blue rectangle simply because I've got good DPTL support here, and we happen to have the 200 passing right in the middle of that DPTL support. So that type of a signal, regardless of what's going on in the 5 range. Notice there's no X1 signal, but also notice that the price did penetrate outside that 3rd standard deviation. And that Bollinger Band, like all the ones I use, is based on a 50 moving average. That particular one works pretty well. So interested in that one. If I scrunch this chart down a little bit, you notice we had the 15 range 200, we got the 600 sloping upward, so there's actually a lot of things going for us on that, even though we didn't have the X1. It's not, the X1 is not the holy grail, it's one of several. So again, as we go, ignoring these because we just did not have confirmation. I just keep moving on here. No 5 range confirmation. You back test these things, and geez, that one worked good. Well, just didn't have a confirmation. We had some things going for us. We had the 50% internal fib, but what I want to be clear on, if you're going to look at these SQ signals, demand multiple CFs. Here we are, 5 range, very unfavorable. We're just outside of the squeeze. It's just not working out. Actually the X1 dots are farther back here on the 5 range. So just not real favorable to take just a X1 type trade. Again, all of these squeeze signals up here, you notice on the 5 range chart, nothing going on over there. Now we come back here to this one, a little more interesting. Now our price on the 5 range is finding support at the 600 like it did to the left. So now we're kind of getting into more of a double bottom situation at the 600 on the 5 range. So we've got a little more to work with on that one, and it was successful. Going up here, we had an X1. Not a whole lot else going on, but you notice it didn't do all that well. We had a kind of it wasn't a flat 200. It started to rise, so we're getting a little counter trend here. That's why I say I really like to see multiple CFs. Same thing here. We're really starting to see a trending action in this 200. Bypass a whole bunch of these. You will have times where you get an SQ signal with some things that you like this one has the 200 EMA from the 15. We've got the X1 dot going for us and all this, and the price takes one more little excursion down. Depending on how you manage your stop, if you had a really, really tight stop, you might get stopped out. or if you had a little bigger stop, that was a good trade. These two SQ signals, as good as they look here at the Bollinger Band, just notice on that 5 range chart, we're not even to the Bollinger Band. And no signals, there's just nothing there to help us on that 5 range chart. You know, did it work? Yes. I'm going to ask a question. Which SQ do you take? Now, if we look at the first one, well, not too much going on. We're at the 600. But look at what's going on in this chart. We've got a magnet above price. We've got a 200 EMA from the 15 range and the 600. You got to believe the price might get drawn to that. And it sure enough did. So we go over here. But you notice with all of these, we didn't get any X1 dots. And we're getting down to these 3, nothing. Just not a lot of help. Price did get to this third. It didn't quite touch it, but it got pretty darn close to the 3rd standard deviation. That might have gotten somebody's attention right there. Okay, this is kind of a rare occurrence, but I wanted to point it out. Now, if I didn't have the BR signals on here, you just see the white SQ. But an SQ had a string of these SAR dots, the red dots. And I am going to take this ellipse off so you can see it better. When you see this SQ signal forming and you see this just several of these dots forming fairly close to the Bollinger Band, very high probability trade. It's a wonderful confirming factor by itself. And it doesn't happen very often. We get going here. We've got some very counter-trend SQs. And I'll tell you one of the things I'd like to do on my indicators, just so you'll see a few more of these. Actually, shortly before I was doing this presentation, my computer crashed. So I lost a little bit of a setting. These are the squeeze settings. The Bollinger Band period, I virtually never change. The Bollinger Band standard deviation, I never change. The Keltner channel multiplier, the bigger the number, the more time in the squeeze. So I'm going to change that to 4. And we'll just get more SQ signals to look at. And that's where that 3 very counter-trend. I think when my computer crashed, I lost that setting. So they're very counter-trend. Now, in a trending situation, you will get some X1 signals. So you really have to kind of ask yourself, if I'm going to get in here, just how far can this trade go with a down-sloping 200, and the this dash dot dot is just the 50 EMA from that 5 range chart. It's the same as the chart on the left. Moving along. Now we get way down here. Let me do that. We've just had this long series of these X1 dots on that left-hand chart. Have we found the bottom? Maybe. We got this SQ signal, but you notice all of those X1 dots, we had nothing going on in this chart. So those are just dots to ignore. The market is impulsing on that left-hand chart. You can see price in between these 2 and 3 standard deviations. That is how I look at an impulsing market. I'm sure Jerry might look at a EMA envelope, which is going to be very similar. But so is that a good SQ signal to take? In my book, it's chancy. It is at a local DPTL, but I have no idea if this market is done impulsing or if it's just going to keep on running. So I wanted to circle that one to say that, yeah, it does have some things going for us, but when I see an impulsing market, I'm always suspicious of, is this really the end? Is it going to reverse enough to make it worthwhile, or is it just going to keep on running? But we didn't have to wait too long to get this little SQ signal up here, well, let me do that. We've got the X1 dot, add a DPTL in the 5 range, and now we are tremendously with this 200. So big difference between these two signals. And again, here we are. You know, we're down here. We got our SQ. We got not much going for us. You know, we had X1 dots way over here, but not here. And nothing going there. This is a way to kind of avoid the noise of a lot of these SQ signals. The challenge, if you're going to use this 5 range chart to confirm, is you kind of have to use these unfiltered. If you start filtering these things out, you're going to miss some of the better confirmed trades. This SQ signal here, both prices were at the Bollinger Band. We just didn't get the X1. That would have been to me, if we had an X1 on the 5 range, that would have been a good trade. But notice, didn't do all that well. It's kind of interesting. We didn't get the X1. How about that? We come down here. Well, we did get the X1. A lot of overhead resistance, didn't work out too well. You know, they're not all going to be winners. This next one, we're getting X1 signals here, but we're just not getting any SQ signals. Finally, we move up, and I did put a blue rectangle here, because this is one of these multi-chart DPTL confluence zones. So we've moved up into that. You know, we've got our SQ signal. If you notice on the 5 range chart on the left, we're right at the 600 EMA. So a lot of things going for this SQ signal. That's what I'm talking about. You know, just if you're going to trade these SQ signals, and particularly I think I'm a big fan of this 5 range chart just because it gives me heads up before these signals form. Just make sure you demand multiple good CFs. Be choosy. Now this one's a little better, okay, because now we have the benefit, now we got a double top. We're still coming back into this zone. Notice on the 5 range, we're still right at that 600. So that's kind of a gimme right there. So we added structure to that one. And we come down. Again, we've got our SQ signal. We've got an X1 dot, but what we've also got, and I put a box here, we've also got a fairly broad zone. You can see it on the left-hand chart. It's a little tighter. It's just this little part of a zone. I would be very suspect that we're going to be coming back into that zone. So these are tough. Which ones do you take? You know, we got this zone, or you could look at it as 2 different zones. You know, we got this zone up here and then just a single DPTL. Well, sure enough, the market came back. So I make a little note. You know, these are kind of tough signals, but that's why I like having these SR zones. And we go back up into this zone. Notice we've got an X1 dot on the left-hand side. We're in a multiple DPTL zone. We're at a new high of the day. And this is at 8:30 in the morning. And probably a technical double top also. So that's one of these things that, you know, hey, we don't have an SQ signal, but we got an awful lot going for us on this in terms of confirming factors. So that would be a good entry on that one. Make a little note here. Let me move it so we can see it. When the 200 and the 600 are close together, wait for a price to get to the 600. Okay? And that's what I'm talking about right here. This SQ signal, it made it to the 200. It made it to the 50% internal fib. But here, very close by, is the 600. I've just seen it happen so many times that it's just better policy to wait for it to get to the 600. Notice we didn't have much going on in the 5 range signal-wise to help us, but I've just learned 600 is a very powerful EMA. And we got a little bit of a 3-bar sell pattern, head and shoulders pattern. So, you know, if you hesitated there, you certainly had an opportunity right there. And moving on, let's see some other examples. One of the things I talk about is, you know, nothing going on in the 5 range to help us, except that we're with the 200 on the 5 range. But this, you know, when the price comes to the 200 like this, that they usually are good for a profitable trade. Now we come down, we're getting into this little DPTL zone here, and again, not much going on. I'm going to get rid of that. On my system, that fuchsia colored DPTL is a 60-minute DPTL, and I've just noticed on these things that that seems to be a very critical DPTL. So moving on. So again, here's our SQ. We're close to this multi-DPTL zone, 600 internal FIP. A lot of things going on here, and a nicely upsloping 200. You know, very nice. Again, didn't get an X1 signal on the other chart, but it looks pretty darn good on the other chart too. Moving along here. One of the things we got two SQs and we got two X1s. So it fired off both times. Not a huge trade, but had some profit potential. Again, this is simply an SQ when we've got very strong moving average help. And sure wish we had more confirmation on that SQ. It sure worked, but we just didn't. Not a lot of DPTL help. One, no signals. Just kind of a little bit of a double bottom. That might have swayed us a little bit there. Very counter trend signals. Just keep in mind you can filter these out completely. I choose to put them all in just when I'm doing this confirmation with these other ones. But I also take a look at, is the market really trending on me? It's just not the time to be taking these. Then we get into some more, true range-bound looking things. No confirmation with any of these. We come down here. Now we've got a 600, a 200. We've got an X1 dot. Okay, now we're interested. That had some nice confirmation with that. Here's our X1 confirmation. Now we had two signals. Both the price was at the same point. But we did have some confirmation on that one. Whereas on this X1 signal, we just did not have the same X1 confirmation, but we had the benefit of the just multiple hits on the same high of day. So it might have had some interest in that one. Here's an example of just a possible TED. That market came down, touched the rising 200. I like that. Got an X1 signal. So that's a possible TED right there. Now we get up here, and here we are, confirmed SQ at high of day and 60-minute DPTL right here. And we got the X1, so a lot of things going for that one. That one worked out very well. One of the things I wanted to do here, I made a little note, this note to myself, hard to see multiple DPTL zone. You see this little tiny thing here. Periodically I'll see these, and I will take the time to center it, pull the control key, and just what I'm doing here is I want to spread this out. And as I spread this thing out, what I'm seeing is there's massive amount of agreement between all kinds of different charts that this is an important area right there. But in fact, they agreed so much that it was almost identical on all these different chart types. And did the price bounce off it? You bet it did. This on the left-hand chart, you will see something that says 3-dot pattern at 15 range, 200, and 50% internal FIP. This little 3-dot pattern is something that I see quite a bit. And I'm not talking 3 dots in a big long trend. I got to be a fairly tight pattern. With that 3-dot pattern ending at some significant area, generally a pretty good indication you're going to see something of a bounce. And we come up now, we get this SQ at the 200. More typical. We had a TED earlier with this same setup. I like this simply because I'm also at the 50 on the 5 range. I'm at the 200 on this chart, and you can see what effect that has. So moving along, SQ with multiple CFs. We've got DPTLs, we've got the 50 on the 5-range chart. It did quite well. These are very counter-trend SQ signals. Are we going to get little X1 dots when the market starts to move like this? Probably so. This is an SQ signal at a very good DPTL zone. But the reality is, if you are in that SQ trade and you're just going to trail on the dots, you're already in a short trade. So sometimes these are of no consequence because you're already committed to the trade going short. And that worked out quite well. And here is a SQ at the 5-range 50. If you go through the 5 range and just look at touches of the 50, you realize it's a pretty darn good confirming factor. So that's a little standalone confirming factor, and it was definitely with the trend of the 200. So that helped a lot of deciding on that one. And we've got a little X1 dot on the 5 range. Up here, no signals, but a very nice touch to the 200. Oh, actually, we do have an SQ. Moving down. Here's our example of there's a TED. Geez, we had a little double bottom and everything. So SQ at the 200, not much else going on the 5 range. You didn't get hurt, with the target 1 of 5 ticks. Probably a break-even trade. And going up, you're going to notice that all these SQs are just not getting much help in the 5 range. Again, all of a sudden we're getting an X1 dot, but it's to the left of the SQ signal. It's not right on the bar. We come up now, and yes, I know SQ. I believe what I did is I changed my Keltner channel so I would see more of these. So we do get an SQ. And there's our 600 EMA. We've got a X1 dot. It's looking very good. And we're far enough away from that 200. It's probably going to terminate, at least initially, or bounce at the 200. So that's one of the things I'll do if I'm taking that and I've got 2 or 3 contracts. I will tend to put the other contract target inside of that 200 a little bit. That seems to work out well. Here's a very successful SQ with just not much confirmation at all. It just, unfortunately, then we go up here and we're getting X1 dots. We're at the 600 on the 5 range. You're kind of wondering, should I be, jumping in here? Maybe. Of course, what I would do is wait for that BR signal. And we're down here. Here we are again. SQ signal. Notice over here we were getting some X1 dots, but we didn't have the SQ signal. Now we're over here. Now we got the advantage of a local double bottom, and we've got the X1 dots at the low of the day. And so that bounced off that quite nicely. Now we've got some DPTLs helping us out here, again at the high of the day. And we also had the 600 EMA on the 5 range passing right in there. No X1 dot. So that might have said, hey, we got several factors working for us there. We come back down here, again, new low of the day, not much else going on. There is some DPTL help, and primarily that fuchsia colored one is the color I use for a 60-minute DPTL. They seem to be my favorite in terms of actually helping. So that was almost, a singular confirming factor. So there are exceptions to all rules, I suppose. Let's see if I got anything else that's any different as we go along here. Yeah, here's the, didn't get the SQ, but we sure are very close to that 15 range 200 EMA, and we're getting X1 dots. So we're just looking for a collection of factors here, should we get in. And here we are with this, SQ that looks great, but we're just not getting much on the 5 range. Here again, no SQ, but price at a DPTL confluence zone. Pull this down a little bit so you can see it. And we had the X1 dots. So there's a possible trade right there. Now, I didn't want to make this just all about SQ signals. It's just another little item. And down here we are at this, I think it's the same 60 minutes, so it's probably a higher time frame double bottom, come to think of it. But if you notice on this left-hand side, we've got this 3-dot pattern. When I get 2 dots in a row, I count that as 1. But 3-dot pattern, SQ at the, these new low of the day, 60-minute DPTL. Yeah, that one's worth looking into. Up here, this one didn't go very far, but it had some pretty good confirming factors. You look at some of these that, well, they're not great trades, and not all of them will be. So it depends how you want to play these, what you want to call your confirming factors. This new low of the day, we had the X1 dot, we had a nearby DPTL. It had some, but the kicker to me is on the 5 range. That price spiked past 3 standard deviations. Just mathematically speaking, it can't stay there very long. It's like a rubber band. It's going to snap back, and it did. So I'm thinking we're going to get into some real, pretty much the same repetitive type things. Several SQ signals to the long side here. Why this one? Well, the price came right down to the 200 EMA on that 5 range, and we've got an upsloping 600. We've got an X1 dot, so the confirming factors are adding up. If we look at this SQ signal, now other than it being a 3-bar sell pattern, there's not all that much going on in the 5 range to help us out, so I would bypass that one. Much more in favor of one that's going with a strongly uptrending 200, and notice we're at the 50 on the 5 range chart. So let me see. Okay, I have a question. I can keep going on these, but let me just check questions. And I'm going to kind of scroll upward. I see your question, Adam. Let me just see if there's anything above that. Okay. Adam asks, when you have time, can you show how to draw the DPTL on different time frames? Yeah, that's very, very simple. I use many different charts to do this, simply because it is my experience and belief that these things calculate differently in different charts. So my standard, whatever market I'm looking at, I use the same basic charts, although I have to tweak them a little bit. I always use a daily, always use a 60-minute. I'm going to use a 10 or a 15-minute. I'm going to use either a 9-3 Renko Supreme or a 12-4 Renko Supreme, depending on how much the market's moving. I'm going to use either a 15 or a 25 range bar chart. The tick chart is all over the place. Basically, and I will tell you what I do. I'll throw up a tick chart, and I'll turn my little DPTL indicator on, and what I want to see is I want to see 25 to 30 lines on my chart. And I want to see enough bars where I don't see, 10 days of data on one screen. So I want to see enough price action. And that's how I do it. I have no special numbers that I use for these tick charts. The same with the volume charts, by the way. I do the same technique. Just really looking for a number that gives me enough price action. And then I start doing my DPTL work. And to answer the question, how do we get a line to show up on all charts? So let's put a horizontal line down, and we'll see. Okay, so we've got a cyan line. So I put it there. I turn my my tool off, and you notice I've got stay and draw mode checked, so that when I'm doing multiple lines, I can just very quickly When I've got a chart up with the DPTLs, I just click, 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 click all these lines. So now we're going to left click on that line, and to select it, we can see the little square, meaning we selected it. Now I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to Properties. You will notice it says Attach To, and right now this says Gold All Charts. That's what you want to have to attach it to every gold chart that you might have open. So when I'm doing these things on a 60-minute chart, as long as my line is defaulted to all charts, it's going to show up on every chart. It's probably not set up that way. It's probably set up to be whatever the chart you just drew the line on. In this case, it's a 4-1 Renko Supreme chart. So you do have to make sure that you go to all charts, set it as default, and now you're going to be putting those lines on every, not every chart, but every gold chart, or every crude oil chart, or whatever chart you're looking at. So that's how that is done. So let me see if there's any other questions. And there are not. And Adam, I hope I answered your question. And Jerry, I think that about exhausts that topic that I wanted to cover today. So Jerry, did you have any questions or comments on this?
No, Dave, that's great. As always, really well done. Excellent material, particularly on an indicator where we haven't covered before, the SQ. So that's
yeah.
Very helpful.
Adam is asking, what are the settings for the bands? The Bollinger Bands I use are always the same. It's interesting. All the stock people will tell you to use a 20 or a 21 moving average. And that just, I will tell you, that stinks on futures. The 50, and by the way, glad you brought this up, Adam. I use a 50 simple, not exponential. I have back tested this over thousands of trades, and for my money, it's one of the rare exceptions when I use a simple moving average. So this is nothing more than just the NinjaTrader Bollinger Band set for 50 and 2 standard deviations, and then on the 5-range chart, I just put it on a second time, and I set it for 3 standard deviations. But I always use that 50 SMA for that. Now the Keltner channel it's going to vary depending on how much time you want your market to be in the squeeze. But just remember, you're going to use a Keltner channel with the same standard deviation setting of 2. And then it has a multiplier factor. The bigger the factor, the more the squeeze. Because the squeeze, by definition, is when the Bollinger Bands get inside the Keltner channels. So it makes sense if you make the Keltner channels wider and wider, you're going to get those Bollinger Bands inside more often. And I did that intentionally just because I'm really looking for these confirming factors with SQ signals. So if you're really going after SQ signals, you use a very large setting on your Keltner multiplier. And if you're really wanting to stay out of range-bound trading, you're not interested in the SQ signals. You want to take trending signals. Well, you're going to make that Keltner multiplier smaller, like 3.2. And again, hope that answers that question. So, Jerry, I think I'll turn things back over to you unless there's other questions.